Okay, so now we had the jolly talk tonight on death. Hello? Okay, we've got a nice talk on death tonight. Now, purgatory. Purgatory is part of what we call the 4 last things. The 4 last things. So the 4 things that happen at the end of our life. So let's just look at the end of our life for a moment. Everyone dies. Okay? Everyone dies. There's never been anyone who didn't die. Even Jesus himself died. Okay? Everyone comes, because the material of our life is limited. Okay? You are all young. I am old. My chances of dying are stronger than yours, unless you do something silly and fall under a bus. Okay? So I've got towards the end of my life, which means my physical body is coming towards its end. You know, I'll be 71 in 2 months' time. I'm old, but I may go on for another 20 years, who knows? But I know that my life is limited, as all of our lives are limited. Why? Because they are material. Okay? The thing about the material, it's material because you can measure it. You can measure it. That which you can measure is material. In other words, it's limited. It's always limited. The material has to be limited, otherwise it wouldn't be material. That which you can measure is limited. How far, how fast, how much, how slow, all these things. Right? So, this chair is material. It's limited. Can only basically, it's a good chair. But that's all it can be. It can't be anything else than a chair. Okay, it could be a good bonfire, but it's not really made to be a bonfire. It's made to sit in. So the thing about the material is it comes to an end. Now, on average, I probably do about 60 funerals a year. Right? About 60 funerals a year. And I attend lots of deaths. I was in hospital this afternoon. I stand with people looking in a coffin where the loved one has died. Materially, it has to come to an end. Nothing lives forever. All right? So that's one reality of life, the material reality. Now, the thing about the material reality, if that is all there is, then when you die, that's the end. But we know that there's something more than just the material reality of life. So when you go home tonight, if you talk to someone, you say, what did you do this evening? You said, oh, I went and listened to a talk from Father John. And they might say to you, well, what's he like? Now, you can answer that question one of 2 ways. You can answer it materially, or you can answer it the other way. So if you answered it materially, you'll say he's bald, fat and old. Now, is that true? Don't be polite. Is it true? Yeah, it is true. Right? It is true. Why? Because it's materially, you can measure it. I didn't actually, when I first came to Canning Town, I had a lot more weight on me. See what you lot have done to me. See, I've lost all this weight. Right? So that's a material reality. So when you say to someone, what are they like? The only person who really wants your physical description is if a copper's after you. Right? They want to know what you look like. But when we say to someone, what are they like? We're not really asking materially what they're like. When you say what they like, you're talking about what sort of person. You know? Oh, Fred Smith, he's really kind. He's really loving. He's really generous. He'll really go out of his way to help. Charlie Smith, he's an absolute so-and-so. I wouldn't trust him as far as I could throw him. Now, we're not talking materially, we just talk about their character, what sort of person they are. Now, life Life is about the combination of the material and the spiritual. And it is the spiritual that brings the material to life. Okay? Can you turn the lights off, Michael? Right. Sorry, this won't work without the other one. And those ones there, please. That's what life is like if we just depend on the material. That's what it's like. It's dark. We can't really see where we're going. We can get lost. We can get frightened because we can't see. I know you're there, right? But at the moment, even without the glasses on, right, you're just a blur. I'm a blur. You can hear me, right? But that's exactly what we are. This is the material realities of life. What brings this to life? Lights. Michael, wherever you are, thank you. All right, lights. It's a very simple equation. Without the light, we remain in the darkness. If all your life is the material, it's half the story. It's half the story. The wisdom of humanity, the wisdom of God, the gift of God, is that our real life is not what we look like, but who we are. And who we are is that we are free. Now, you may not feel that you're free. You may look at things, constraints, you can look at all sorts of different things, problems, events in your life that have trapped you in certain places, all sorts of things. But it says in the scripture, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And if you're not free, if you don't feel free, it will be because the truth is not where it's meant to be in your life. It's not where it's meant to be. And therefore there is a darkness. Now, one of my favourite sayings is, better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. We can all really curse the darkness. But when you light a candle, suddenly the darkness isn't what it was. So this is called freedom. We are free to choose. Why are we free to choose? And this is a really important lesson to understand in our faith. Why are we free to choose? Because there is one thing that God cannot do. One thing. He can do everything else, but there's one thing God cannot do. He can't force you to love him. He can't. Because if he did, we hear in the scriptures, God is love. Well, if he is love, if he is love and he forces us, it's not love. All right? So if I say, Adrian, will you be my friend? It's not going to work, is it, really? He might take it, but it's not ground for friendship. You can't buy it. It's either there, and if it's there, it's because you choose. You choose. That principle is the foundation for understanding what happens after we die. It's the foundation for what happens after we die. In other words, there is a freedom that's within every human being. And this is the understanding of that freedom that helps us to understand how we live on earth and what will happen to us when we die. The material will die. This amazing body of mine, right? There'll come a time when it's not going to be there anymore. I remember once I had someone, a young fella from this parish died, and we had to exhume the body, all right? Several years later. And it's really complicated, exhuming a body, I know? And the family couldn't face going, so they asked me if I would go. So I had buried him, you know, I'd been with him shortly before he died, and I won't go into why he needed to be exhumed, but he did need to be exhumed. We dug him up, and when they took the lid off the coffin, you know, the only thing I recognised was that he had a shirt on, and in his top left-hand pocket, just before we sealed the coffin, I put a little prayer card in the shirt pocket. And because it was a double, you know, two pieces of material together, that was the only thing that hadn't deteriorated. So the little picture of a saint I'd put in his top pocket, that was all that was left. Everything else was gone. Everything else had gone. So materially, it comes to an end. So what happens to us now? So the four last things. Right, so the first of the last things is that we die. We come to an end. And this is what the Book of Wisdom says. The souls of the virtuous are in the hands of God. No torment will ever touch them. In the eyes of the unwise, they did appear to die. Their going looked like a disaster. They're leaving us like annihilation, but they are in peace. If they experience punishment, as men see it, their hope was rich with immortality. Slight was their affliction, great will their blessings be. For God has put them to the test and proved them worthy to be with him. He has tested them like gold in a fire and furnace, accepting them as a holocaust. When the time comes for his visitation, they will shine out. The word of the Lord will be with them. I have been with many, many, many people when they died. It's a very privileged moment. And what happens is something goes. Something just stops. You know, it's the heart stops, but it's not that. That which was is not there any longer. How do you describe it? I don't know very, very well how to, except for it just happens. Sometimes, you know, you're in a ward and they've got the big screen over it, and you can just see the number declining. It's pretty horrible, actually. You know, because you really don't want the family, because they all end up looking at the number going down and down, and it's a very distressing moment, as you can imagine. But it just stops. It's like your car, you know, when you've got an old sort of knackered car and it won't go any longer. It's a bit like that. No matter what you do to it, it ain't going to work. It's just finished, and that's what happens to us. Now, at that moment, okay, that is the moment of death. That is when our natural life comes to an end, and we enter into our supernatural life. Is what the word supernatural means. It is that moment when we learn from the material things, the natural things that we can see, measure, all those things, that natural life comes to an end. And we then enter into the supernatural moment. The word super means the bigger picture. We move from this world into the next. And what happens is we then, at that moment, come to that moment when our freedom on earth to make choices, then we come to that moment where we are asked, what's it all about? What have you done with your life? What have you done with your life? So the four last things are death, judgment, heaven, and hell. Now I'm going to start with hell. because that's the one you're probably all interested more than anything else. Okay? Hell. Right, the basic principle for hell is this. You do not go to hell by mistake. And if that doesn't put a smile on your face, I don't know what will. Why? Because, all right, we're afraid of hell. Why would we be afraid of hell? Well, we don't go there by mistake. We go there by choice. You don't go to hell and think to yourself, well, how the hell did I get here? The punishment of hell is that you know exactly why you're in hell. You know it. You're clear about it. You think to yourself, oh, hell. What? Hell is not a mistake. Hell is a choice that we have to make. Like all choices. Why? Because the God who created everything is a God who will not force us. That's the nature of love. It's the nature of love. So hell is a consequence. It's not God sitting there saying, I'm going to get him one day. You wait till he gets in here. I know where he's going. No, that's our choice. That's entirely up to us. It's entirely up to us. Heaven is because in our life we've taken life seriously. And what have we taken seriously? Our weaknesses. Hell is not a place where people go because they've been wicked. No. Hell is a place you go to because you don't care about being wicked. Hell is a place you go to when you just don't care. And that's your choice. So, for many years, I was chaplain at a maximum security Category A prison. All right? About bad a bunch of individuals as you can imagine. All right? And people used to say to me when I'd come back, they'd say, Father, what's it like? Well, I can't tell you what it's like because you can't talk about prison if you work in a prison. But you can use imagination. All right? So Cat A, maximum security, every time I went in there, the first place I had to go was to go and visit the separation cells. So these were people who couldn't be out on the main corridors, and you couldn't go in the cell because it was too dangerous to go in the cell. So there was a slit about that big, that wide, and you could just look through it and they could look to you from the other side. It was horrible. It was horrible. But some of the most amazing conversations I've ever had in my life were through those little slits in the maximum security prisons. And people would say to me, you must have met some real evil people in prison. And I said, I have never met an evil person in my life. Ever. Never met an evil person. I've met lots of ordinary people, some of whom have done evil things. Yeah, there's one of them talking at the moment. We all do evil things. We're all capable of evil. That's why the prayer that Christ taught us ends with those words, and deliver us from evil. Because evil is real, and we can be evil. But we do it because we make a choice. It's our choice. We're not forced to do these things. Okay, events around us may have an impact. People may have an influence on us. People may have done things to us that have really hurt us. All those things are true. But in the end, it's our choice. So all those men I used to meet in the prison, none of them were evil. But tragically, they'd all done evil things. And that was the choice that they'd made. And society has to see it in a certain way to protect itself. So it's not inevitable. Evil is not inevitable. So when we die, we will be judged. We will be judged on the choices that we made that we never repented of. So this is the next important point. Okay? There is nothing that God cannot forgive. And if I had to say the hardest thing in my life as a priest, and I've been a long time as a priest, I'm nearly 50 years a priest, the hardest thing is to actually convince people that they can be forgiven. It's really hard. I can't, Father, after what I've done, I just can't forgive myself. Well, in one way, I say to him, well, that's your problem, mate, because it's not God's problem. God's problem is that he will forgive you, because there's nothing you can do to make God love you more. And there's nothing you can do to make God love you less. He just loves you. And that's the key to understanding the whole thing. Because if love is real, it's freely given and freely received. Even when we've messed up, like a nuclear explosion, that may affect our life. That may end us being in prison. Yeah, that may end us having all sorts of problems in our life. But that's not God's view of us. So if we look at the classic time of betrayal, right? Betrayal, a choice that was a terrible betrayal, is the story of St. Peter. So Peter gets called by Jesus, right, to be the one who is the rock on which the church is going to be built. He says, you are Peter, and on this rock I shall build the church, and the gates of hell shall never prevail against it. What you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. What you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So that's the basis for Peter, the first pope, the foundation on which the church is built. So it's a massive. But it comes to the crucifixion, and Peter's there, and he's afraid. He's afraid. And someone says to him, excuse me, aren't you one of his friends? Peter says, no, I don't know the man. I don't know him. 3 times he was asked that question. 3 times. And those 3 times, he said, I don't know him. I don't know him. Crucifixion happens afterwards, eventually then the resurrection. And when Peter meets Jesus after the resurrection, all right, let's put it the other way. If you was Jesus, all right, and you had said to this man Peter, I trust you to carry on everything once I'm gone, and he betrayed you, what would you say to him? Come on, be honest. What would you say to him? You let me down. You're a good for nothing. Why did I choose you? Oh, where did I go wrong with you? Wow, that was a real bad judgment on my part. He doesn't say any of those things. All he says to Peter is, Peter, do you love me? That's the only question he asks. He just says, do you love me? And he asks him 3 times for each of the betrayals. That's how God treats us. He doesn't say, you got it wrong. He doesn't say, you messed up. All he says is, do you love me? And it's up to us to make a choice. So, we die because materially our life comes to an end. When we die, we will be judged on the decisions that we make on earth. There's the immediate judgment when we die, and that is a response to what we've done. So God's not going to force us, even then. It is, if you have rejected me, then that's your choice, and that's what hell is. It's the rejection. Not my rejection of you, it's your rejection of the good news. But then we come to this moment between, because the 2 judgments, the first judgment is the moment we die. The second judgment is at the end of time. It's at the end of everything, when the Lord comes back and we come to this moment at the end of time, when the world ends, when it all ends, and that's it. Now, when we come to those moments, between the first judgment and the second judgment, when we die, okay, so let me put it to you like this. If I was going to die now, at this second now, would I be ready to be face to face with God? What would I say? If this, in the next 10 seconds, I was going to be facing God, I know what I'd say. I can explain. All right? Just give me a minute. I can explain. I can tell you why I did those things. Purgatory is the recognition, all right? Is the recognition, not that I've turned my back on God with 100%, but I recognize my weaknesses. I know my weaknesses. But my weaknesses are not such that they have turned me against God, but they are such that they have turned my life in a way that I've not embraced what God wanted to give me. Yet I still am open. So it's very, you know the church doesn't say there's anyone in hell. Did you know that? The only one who's in hell is Satan and the angels, the fallen angels. The teaching of the Catholic Church is very clear. Right? Now, if I was in charge, the place would be full up. I know I'd want to send down there. You know? They'd be shoveling coal forever, the ones I would want to send down there. But thank God it's not me doing the judging. And the mercy of God, this is why mercy is of such importance. So, just to bring this to an end, I'm going to talk to you about an amazing story I heard. Years ago, I was given a retreat in a school, and they brought in an ex-pupil of the school who had had a pretty tough time in his life. But he had a story to tell. And this is the story. So he was a young man during the 1960s. He lived in Chelsea. And he came from a pretty good family, wealthy family. But he just really fell off the cliff. He really fell off the cliff. And he was on to drugs and all sorts. He was walking barefoot down the King's Road, and he stepped on a piece of glass, serious bit of glass. And he just pulled it out and carried on walking. And within certainly 24 hours, he was in casualty, and he had, I can't imagine what it was, but he was dying. He was dying. And he was unconscious. He didn't die, but when he came to again, he told this story. He said, I was aware, even when I was unconscious, of something that was there in my life. He said, and I had this sense that I was on a journey, and I came to this crossroads. When I got to the crossroads, there was a real attractive light to the left. But a subtly more attractive light to the right. And I had to choose. Was I going to go to the left or to the right? I chose to go to the right. And he described that as he goes to the right, the light got brighter and brighter and brighter, until he realized that what he was looking at was actually someone looking at him. And this was the face of God. And he couldn't look into God's face, because of everything he'd done. And so he looked away. When he looked back, he once again looked into the face of God. That's purgatory. That's purgatory. It is that moment when we die, when we realise. We realise that when, it's like, your best friend, your mother, your sister, whoever it is, someone you are closest to. When we've hurt them, what do we say? I couldn't look them in the face. Why can't you look them in the face? Because you loved them and you've hurt them. And you just can't look them in the face. And you look away, or you don't go there. You avoid them. When we come face to face with God, when we look away, that's the cleansing. That's the forgiveness. That the fact that there I am before God himself, and I'm looking in the wrong direction. I'm looking in the wrong direction. There is God, and I'm looking away. That's the pain of our mistakes, of the decisions that we make. Yet when I turn back, that's the forgiveness of God. And that's the light of heaven. Heaven is being united with the God who created us, who loved us, who gives us every opportunity, even the opportunity not to be saved. Even the opportunity not to be saved. So our life, as we look at it, is about the choices that we make. And brothers and sisters, we all make some terrible choices in our life. Some really awful ones. No? And when we make those choices, what we have to recognise is this, that everyone makes mistakes. The Pope goes to confession every week. People get amazed. The Pope goes to confession? Of course he goes to confession. Every saint went to confession. There isn't a saint who didn't go to confession. There isn't a saint who didn't get it wrong. Starting with, St. Peter. What was the sin of Judas? Is that he despaired of being forgiven. That was the sin of Judas. He would have been forgiven. But he despaired. He didn't think, he thought to himself, what I've done is so terrible, I cannot be forgiven. That's the greatest sin of all. It's up there, it's the 100%. I cannot be forgiven. There is something God can't do. Nonsense. God can do anything. And so, we look at this reality. We look at the mercy of God. And the mercy of God is, if we ask for that mercy, we will be forgiven. There is nothing that can separate us from the love of God, even our own stupidity. And so when we look at our life, what we see is this swinging. You make a mistake. What happens? You repeat the mistake. You make a mistake and you learn from your mistake. Now, when you learn from a mistake, that's called wisdom. That's what wisdom is. Wisdom is actually, is that which comes from the murkiness of life. But that's because you've learned from it. When you do something wrong and you don't learn from it, that's called stupidity. All of us swing every day between incredibly wise and unbelievably stupid. And God stands in the middle, waiting. He doesn't condemn, he loves. Peter, why do you let me down? Do you love me, Peter? That's the only question he's ever going to ask you. And it's up to you what you say. He will not force you. God does not come along with a dodgy £5 note and say, will you be my mate? It doesn't work like that. It's up to us. That's our freedom. That's where it begins. So, heaven, purgatory, judgment, and hell. And remember, you don't go to hell by mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Could you, if anyone's got any questions, now's the time to ask Father.
Yeah. Yes.
I wanted to ask you, because you said that God, when it comes to free will, you said that there's one thing that God can't do, and that's, give you the choice. But do you think, is it really more a case of he won't, or that he can't?
Okay, I'm using can't in a human sense. Okay, I think we can say that the nature of God is love. And of the nature of that which is love, to make it what it is, this is the most important part of it. All right? It's the most important part of it. So it's not that he says, well, I'm not, I can't do it. It is the nature of God, because it's the nature of love.
So like unconditional love as a basis. Like.
Unconditional love is God. If you want to describe God, just that phrase, unconditional love.
Yeah.
All right? That there's nothing, that's it. All right? That's it. And so, very often God, we have this weird, all sorts of weird and wonderful ideas, but in the end, it's about this one thing, freedom. So the scripture where it says in St. John, it says, you shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. So the thing about truth is that you've got like a litmus test for truth. All right? So is what I'm doing in my life true? Well, the litmus test is, well, am I free? That's how you test whether what you're, because we can go after all sorts of so-called truths. I mean, you've heard, from time to time you hear people in the media, and they say, well, this is my truth. This is my own truth. And you think, that's a little bit weird. Huh? Because if it's true, I didn't invent it, that's for sure. It's not my truth. I can take it to myself and I can make it part of who I am, but it will be a truth that sets me free. Because if it doesn't set me free, it's not true. So what do we have? The issues that, it's a bit simplistic what I'm going to say now, but the issues that we face in our world today is that how do we know what truth is about? You can only find what truth is about when you look into the face of another human being. In other words, the way you engage with another human being. So what happens is we spend most of our lives looking into little glass screens. And that's one of our problems of humanity today, is that if everything you do is about what you want, and we want all sorts of things. I want West Ham to win the cup. It's probably not going to happen. But I want it. But it's not, it's unlikely it's going to happen. But it's difference between what I need and what I want. What I need is that which will make me truly human. I need friendship. I need family. I need to be forgiven. I need hope. I need faith. I need wisdom. I need understanding. All these things are free. Even when I make a real mess of it, it don't go away. I just have to relearn it again. So that's where the truth is. The truth is, these are the things that I need. I want all sorts of things. But it's only the things that I need that will set me free. So if you don't feel free, if you feel trapped, then it's a pretty good thing, well, actually, possibly I'm looking in the wrong direction. So if you are, spending all your time looking at people who are actually on a computer and you don't speak to anyone during the course of the day, that's no good. It's trapping us. We're trapped in a transactional world, because remember, all that stuff you have to pay for. You tell me any computer that they're giving away free, or the latest internet connection that so we can have this for nothing. No, don't work like that. But the beauty of human relationships is they must be free, freely given. So God, this coming back. Sorry, I wandered a bit from your question, but it is of the nature of God, because He is love, that He will give us that freedom. He will give us that freedom. Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
So I've heard God as described as the source of all goodness itself, and that heaven is sort of full communion with God, so like a union with His divine will, and hell being described as the privation of good. So the most painful thing is to be separated from the source of all goodness and the source of and love itself, basically. I just wanted to know what the stance of the church is on heaven, hell, and purgatory, or whether they're states, places, or both at the same time.
Okay, so again we have to come between. Okay, so the created world is material. So I come back to this. How do you describe? John Armitage. What's he like? So the world in which we are living in at the moment is a material world. But we know that which is beyond the material, all right, what that looks like, okay, it's easy for us to say the material, bald, fat and old. That's an easy description of it. Yet I know, when I close my eyes, I know who I am. Now that's something I really can't, it's just the reality of me. And the spiritual reality, that which we know but we do not see, but can guide us as we go through life, is those spiritual realities. It's that which we cannot see, but we know it's there. Okay, so my mum and my dad, they've been dead years now, years. All that's left is a piece of lace from my mum's wedding dress, which I've got, and a telescope that my dad bought me when I was 16. Materially, that's all there is. But the man I am today is because of them. And the man I continue to be today is because of them. It's because of the love that they showed me. If you ask me to prove it and show it, I can say, look, there's the wedding dress, there's the telescope. But I can't really describe it materially. I just know it's who I am. So that's not a very clear answer, but there's the two realities, the material reality, which we experience upon the earth, which is of creation, in other words, made by God, on this earth, at this place. But then when we move beyond creation, if this is the end, which of course many people think it is the end, that there's nothing, you can't go beyond that, but that's really not what our hearts tell us. It's not what our hearts tells us. Yeah.
So I like the reference you made to Peter denying Christ 3 times. And when you made that reference, I thought about David and Bathsheba, the sin that he committed, and Prophet Nathan revealing it to him in a story about someone else, and said, who is this person? That person needs to be judged. The hope for David was there was forgiveness. But at the same time, there was the revelation that there was going to be a consequence. Tamar and Absalom. I was wondering if you could speak about, hell is an extreme. I was wondering if you could speak about the consequences of sin. Maybe it being immediate or it being delayed. And just the relationship that, God forgives. But at the same time, there is a relationship between hope, not being in despair like Judas, but also knowing that there is a consequence.
Well, I don't need to tell you about the consequences of sin, do you? We could have a really interesting hour if you all came up here and told us your stories, right? Wouldn't we? Be rolling all over the floor, wouldn't we? Really? You did that? I'd never thought you'd have done that. So we're all aware of the consequences of our actions. Right? I think our problem is this comes to the thing, can we be forgiven? Can we be forgiven? And we can see that every indication of every story of the scriptures of the life of Jesus is he's talking about the mercy of God. And I think there are two words that again, a litmus test, you could say. One is an optimism that things will get better. No? Well, I'm not optimistic at all. I'm very pessimistic. Sorry. I'm pessimistic about things getting. I am really pessimistic.
Are you talking about just the condition?
The condition we're in at the moment. Optimism. Am I optimistic? No, I'm not. What I am is full of hope. There's a big difference. One is the sense of, I'm sure it'll all get better. I'm sure the Prime Minister will sort it all out. I'm sure when we get the next government in, everything's going to be absolutely wonderful. Not many grounds for that at the moment, is there, really? We think, yeah, you can be optimistic. You think, well, if the Tories get back in, or Reform gets in, or etc., etc., etc. So that's optimism. And it's like a human emotion, it's a human feeling. But it's not based on anything apart from a feeling. And remember, feelings are neither right nor wrong nor good nor bad. They just are. The issue is not what we feel, the issue is what we do based on our feelings. I can get really angry, and I feel angry. I can feel upset, I can feel disappointed, I can feel all those things. But if I start going around shooting people because of it, well, that's the choice I make. Just because I feel it doesn't mean I have to do it. And so I think what we find is that hope is an inner strength. So I'm not pessimistic. Last week I had a whole morning with an MP who asked to come and see me. Fine fella. And he certainly was not optimistic about the state of politics at the moment. And I said to him, well, where do you get your hope from? And he didn't quite get it, the word. And he was just thinking that's what optimism meant. But it's not. Hope is something in which we can trust. Politics is just the human way of dealing with things. Sometimes they get it right, most of the times they don't get it right. You know? And that's not because they don't want to, but because it's based on a wisdom that is not, well, it's based more on a stupidity than it is on a wisdom. You know? So sorry, yeah. It's unpredictable, yeah. It's got no foundation on it. Right? So a couple of weeks ago, I was up in, York. And I had a day spare, so I wanted to go to Durham. All right? Right up the north. And the reason I wanted to go to Durham, because I wanted to go to Durham Cathedral. Now, there are two saints buried in Durham Cathedral. One is Saint Bede, who was a monk of the 6th century, who essentially was the first historian of the events of this country. You know, but then it wasn't England in those days, it was just Britain. So he was writing just after the departure of the Roman troops going back to Rome. All right? And he's buried there. The other one is St Cuthbert, who's a remarkable one of the earliest missionaries in this country. But I wanted to go there, as well as going to their tombs, I wanted to go and see, because they've got the only copy of Magna Carta. All right? Now, Magna Carta, as you know, is the very foundation of our civic life in this country. Right? It is on which, so the reason in this country why you can't just arrest someone, you've got to have this and that and other. It's, no, don't always work like that, but it is the foundation. Yet when you read it, it's like, you're reading the scriptures, because that's where it came from. That's where it came from. It wasn't based on a political idea, it was based on the scriptures. You can't understand the history of this country unless you realise that it's a Catholic country. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not an Anglican country. So there was this all big fuss recently. Very nice, very nice when the Pope and the King met together, and that was lovely. First time in 500 years. And so it all started 500 years ago. Catholicism has been the foundation of this country for the last 1800 years. When the first Roman soldiers, so who was the first martyr? It was St Alban, who was a Roman soldier. And he was a pagan, but he met a Christian priest, and he was so impressed by this priest that he hid him and he changed his clothes over. He gave the priest his clothes and he wore the priest's clothes. Priest escaped, then they captured him, and that was it. He was done for. But that was way, way, way back. It's the very foundation of who we are in this country. From this country, we sent missionaries, who the evangelized of Germany were from this country. Holland was from this country. Because this is where the faith was so strong. And it's the very foundation. And when we look at the moment in this history, am I optimistic? No. Am I full of hope? Completely. Because there is never a good time to be witnessing to the gospel. It's just the time in which we live. So when St. Gregory the Great, who was the great Pope of Rome, who sent St. Augustine to England to speak to the pagan English, the Roman Empire had collapsed. Rome was being wiped out by the Justinian plague. The emperor had left for Constantinople, so the Pope that's why the Pope's the boss of Rome, because the emperor at the time left to go to Constantinople. And he was left in the midst of all this chaos. The barbarians were banging at the gates, they were invading Rome, and he didn't have an army left. Yet at one moment, he's sitting in his chapel in the Vatican at the time thinking, I think I'm going to send missionaries to England. You think he would have other things to worry about, wouldn't you? But that's not how it works. That's how the history, and that's where the optimism, if he did it on the basis he was optimistic, he wouldn't have got out of bed. But hope, yeah, he kind of gets that. And the consequence of hope is joy, not happiness. We can't always be happy. I'm not happy on a Saturday, normally, when I see the results. It makes me quite depressed. I think, oh, God, well, they never win. Huh? And happiness is just, it's an emotion. It's an emotion. But joy is the consequence of hope. That means you have a strength, an inner strength inside of you, that despite what's happening around you, you know that strength because God is with me. That's what joy is. So joy is to happiness what a puddle is to the deep sea. So happiness is a puddle. Quick, oh, steak and chips. Woo, wonderful. Yeah, I'm really happy, steak and chips. I eat steak and chips. And that's it, it's done. I want more steak and chips. Well, you can't have it at the moment. That's happiness. And it just doesn't last. It's nice to have it, but it doesn't last. It's an emotion. And it's an emotion that's affected by events. Affected by events. Joy is the inner strength of faith, where we've accepted truth into our lives, and even though everything is falling apart around us, we believe that God is with us. And the greatest, probably one of the great stories of that is the story of Father Maximilian Kolbe. So Father Maximilian Kolbe was a Franciscan priest, a Polish Franciscan priest, very famous in Poland. Before the war, he went out to Japan. He set up a whole range of things in Japan. Comes back, Second World War breaks out, and the Nazis do not like his take on things. So he gets arrested, and he gets sent to Auschwitz. And lots of Polish priests ended up in Auschwitz. And the thing was, if someone escaped, I think it was say, for every one person who escaped, 10 prisoners would be executed. Okay? So, and all they do is they just come along, they just come and say, you. And that was it. Maximilian's standing there, and the man next to him, the German soldier, says, you, and he just cries out, what will become of my family? And Father Maximilian steps forward and says, take me. Now that was an incredibly, generous is not the word to do, but that's not the story. So what happened then is they took all the men, they locked them into a shed, and they left them there till they starved to death. They just left them. What the soldiers couldn't work out was when they passed, they could hear the men singing. They could hear them singing hymns. And of course this was Maximilian, who was sharing, even at this last moment in his life, what was it? But it happened. It's well documented. He wasn't happy, but he knew he was doing God's will. And when we do God's will, that's where the joy comes from. Sorry, it's almost impossible to me to give a short answer to a question, so I do apologise. Right, do you want to leave it there or one more question? If there is one more question.
Okay, I'd like three. Whilst a lot of us know what's right, what's wrong, what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, so that we can maybe have some, I don't want to call it encouragement, but go away with maybe simple, practical, maybe not practical tips on things that we could do to, I'm calling it avoid purgatory. I know that it might not be able to avoid it altogether, for one reason or another, but maybe then, if I can put it this way, the time spent in purgatory, it's what should we be looking to do going forward? What should we have clear in our minds?
Okay.
Practical tips.
3 things. Every day pray. It doesn't matter how you pray. All right? People say, they'll come and say, Father, I only did 14 and a half decades of the rosary this week. I say, yeah, and? Well, I'm not praying. I said, no, you are praying. Prayer is not the prayer you say. Really important. Prayer is the desire to pray. So do you want to pray? So a quick litmus test, right, is, I'm really struggling with prayer at the moment, Father, and I say,
it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality.
and the quality comes from your heart. That's it. So it's the desire for. You will not pray unless you want to do it. You won't go to the pictures unless you want to do it. You won't have a big slap-up meal unless you want to do it. It's what's in your heart. So the first thing is that prayer, the prayer of the heart is the fact. If you want to say the rosary, if you want to read spiritual books, if you want to come and kneel before the Blessed Sacrament, all those things are wonderful expressions of prayer. But unless you have the desire to do it, you won't do it. You can have every hymn book in the world, every prayer book in the world. But unless you actually do it, engage in that prayer, unless you have the desire for it, and if you only say 14 and a half decades of the rosary, I don't think God's going to be too anxious about that. But if you don't want to pray, then he will be concerned. So prayer is the first thing. And remember, prayer changes me, not God. The second thing is the truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Look for the truth. Read the scriptures. Read the spiritual books. Listen. In your prayer, listen to what God is saying to you. And God doesn't say, right, I want you to do this next Wednesday week. It's the Spirit of it's a wisdom. It's the gifts of the Holy Spirit. The gifts of the Holy Spirit are wisdom, understanding, knowledge. All these different gifts that are given to us at confirmation. They're there to give us that wisdom to understand what to do. And it's the truth. And it's only that truth, and there is no other truth, but the truth that God loves us. It is a truth that has been there for thousands of years. And that truth is embodied in the Eucharist. So that's in fact, that's the one that should come before it. But the Eucharist is the body of Christ himself. It is the source and the summit of the Christian life. So recently you may have heard this big increase of, I don't know where they got it from, big increase of young people coming to church. I cannot think where that would have come from. Can you? Any ideas where that one could have come from? So we had the Guardian, from the Guardian newspaper, phoned me up and said, can we come and interview you? So she came along and she said, so why have you got all these people? 50,000 people went to Mass at Westminster Cathedral over Easter. Right? 50,000. 5,000. We had 5,000 at Mass here over Easter. So she said, when something new happens, it's because you've done something new. Which is not unreasonable, is it? So she said, what have you done new in your parish? That so many people come. And I'm scratching my head and I'm thinking, oh God, what have I done new? Then I realised and I said, well, the fact of the matter is, the only way you can understand Catholicism is that it's not new. It never changes. Everything changes around it. People changes, the culture changes, there's wars, there's famines, there's God knows what goes on. But that which is true doesn't change. Why? Because it can't change. Why? Because it's true. And if you want to test it, see if you're free. And if you're not free, well, you've gone on down a road in the opposite direction. And so, every day, I don't do anything new every day. I do occasionally, but I don't do it every day. But what I do every day is ancient. I do something ancient every day. I celebrate the Eucharist.
Quick question, right?
Yeah,
And I don't want to go too into theology or anything,
Yeah.
but I'm really with your point about the Catholic Church being the truth, but when the Pope this week declares that Mary isn't the co-redeemer after so long the Church saying that she was, how do you
He didn't say that she wasn't. He didn't.
It's not,
No,
it's
no,
not
no,
wise to,
no. He didn't say that it wasn't.
Yeah.
So
Right?
what Protestant makes out like having a go at me?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Yeah. He can't. No. He didn't say that it wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
He was saying that it was a particular understanding, because theology is a human understanding of how it all works. And the idea of the co-redemptress of Mary is a relatively, now someone could shoot me down on this, a relatively recent understanding of the importance of Mary. The thing is that all of the doctrinal issues of Mary are issued by a papal degree. There is no papal degree on this one. Okay, so you've got the Assumption, you've got the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception. These are all fundamental. The co-redemptress is more, it could be seen as a devotional one. And if someone said that that's what I feel, well, okay. But he's saying as a foundational one of understanding Mary, it's not to be encouraged.
Okay.
All right? It's not to be encouraged. Rarely the Pope will say, you can't do that.
So it's just a little bit of clarity, right? So I'm not changing doctrine.
Yeah, no, it's not changing doctrine.
Okay.
No, because it was never doctrine. It was a pious understanding, of the role of Our Blessed Lady, and an important one. And there are elements of, like all things, there's an elements of truth in them. So the last thing then, so we've got truth. Sorry, we've got prayer that sets us free. Sorry, we've got prayer that changes us, the truth that sets us free. And the last one is radical generosity. Remember, the word radical means going back to the roots. That's what it means. It's nothing to do with politics. All right? It's about, I find the roots of something. All right? And radical generosity means I find out really who I am by what I give away. Actually, in fact, the only way I can find out who I am. If who I am is what I want, and the thing about the test is when you're radically generous, you change two lives. You change the life of the person you serve, and you change yourself. Those three things would be, in answer to your question, Michael, would be guidelines. If you're not praying, start praying. If you're going after some other truths, then realise it's not going to set you free. And if you only think about yourself, you'll never understand yourself. Okay, time to finish. Thank you, and thank you very much for your attention.